takeaway that I see is that you care about the story and you care about the action, but you like to keep things moving. Whereas, like, you know, for me, I am far more reserved and like, all right, what do I have to do to preserve? Where yours like, all right, what do I have to do to be fun? I'm Nerdarchist Ted.
I'm Nerdarchist Dave.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. All right, looks like we got another video today, and what are we talking about?
So today we're doing an RPG discussion video, and it's Dave, Nerdarchist Dave sucks at RPGs.
So why do you think you suck at TTRPGs?
All right, so really what we're talking about is character death today. And I've recently had another character die. And I was like, oh, that might be a cool topic to talk about, character deaths and decisions we make that lead up to those deaths. And I was like, yo, Ted, what was the last character to die? Well, like 5 years ago.
During a one-shot.
And like, Ted's characters just don't die. I'm like, oh, maybe I just suck at this game.
So we are totally throwing Dave under the bus here. We're going to talk about character death and, you know, some of the character stories and decisions that are in there. You know, for me, like, we were in a one-shot. I was playing a sorcerer, and we were at the final encounter, and, you know, so we'd already taken some damage. We won. The thing blows up and does enough damage to just outright kill my character. Not death saving throws, but it took me to, like, my hit points and damage threshold. So it's like, all right, you're just straight up dead. And I'm like, dude, that sucks. But it was a Halloween game. We were literally playing on Halloween. So it was...
I also got to kill another fan.
And
well, their character. The fan was fine.
He killed a character. Let's not start some, you know, craze, you know, murder hunt on Dave. Dave's never killed anyone as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. So it's okay to kill characters in the game, just not your players.
Indeed.
In life. So no matter what they do and how much they annoy you. But yeah, no, you know, it is a part of the game. And also some games, it's more of a part of than others, right? And like my last character death was a game where you know the fatality is much higher than you would expect, and it was also part of our session 0 and discussion about how do we feel about our characters dying in the game.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those things that was a little bit tricky. So that was in Shadow of the Demon Lord, and we'll get more into that specific story, you know, on the other side. If you like these videos and you'd like to help us keep making more, why not come check us out over on Patreon and support us over there?
As a special reward, you'll receive 5e content for both players and DMs alike. We have all kinds of benefits over there. We make magic items, spells, subclasses, races, feats, so much more that you're going to gain access to every month. There will be a link in the description as well as one of these cards for a free sample that you can download and try before you buy. It also might help preventing Nerdarchy from dying as a thing if you support us over on Patreon. Since I've been playing, with Nerdarchy, I've had quite a few characters die. But more recently, I would say within the last couple of years, I've had Guard die. My character, Artie, which was a replacement for Tunk, died. Now, Artie, got better, but technically he died.
Okay.
Also, even before that, Tony Two Tusks was the death that I had. And I feel like there's probably some others as well that I'm not even remembering.
Well, when you're a part of a lot of different games that are, you know, a little bit more gritty, a little bit more brutal, those things are kind of there. Yeah. And if you're talking about one-shots are even more like, doesn't really matter what the outcome is.
I will say all those characters are 5e D&D characters, and they were campaigns.
Well, not Guard.
Except for Guard, right? Yeah. Except for Guard. And even, also Worm was another character. The whole party got TPK'd, and Worm was another one that faded to black on. I had a Vast Grim character that faded to black on, where it's like, hey, did they die? Did they not die? It was kind of iffy, but it didn't actually happen in the game. But the very last one was Guard, and that happened in Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Yeah, and this one, the DM kind of went into, at the very start of the combat, a very narrative element, and you know, I've tried to pay a little bit more attention, and since I'm new to Shadow of the Demon Lord, it was a scenario of is he just really narrating a descriptive, or is he trying to sell this is a foe that is beyond you. And I literally called that out to the players. Like, I'm not going to ask the DM, but I'm throwing that out there to them. Now, in Shadow of the Demon Lord, as I said, it's a very gritty game. We had a ghoul that was on our side. That's literally a race or an ancestry that you can play. And then Dave was like a robot person, Clockwork. I forget exactly what.
Yeah, they're Clockworks.
So, like, those were the two characters that wound up meeting a gruesome end.
Yeah, the trigger warning for blood and gore and stuff, but not so much with the Clockwork, but with the ghoul, like the werepossum, which that was our overwhelming foe. The werepossum. They'd been traveling with us for several days. We actually rescued this person that was kind of like living in a shack in the woods, and they seemed mentally not right, and we kind of wanted to help them, but they'd been with us for several days. And we were trying to help them. Well, night falls, the moon comes out, the werepossum changes, jumps off the cart he was riding in, and rips out the jugular to the ghoul character.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was like literally just enough to put him down. And it was like, all right, that's it. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, that was our tank. Like, that was the dude who was like supposed to keep us alive.
Well, one of the tanks. Guard is pretty tanky, too.
True.
And I actually soaked the first round of damage without too much trouble. But I had a plan. Like, I wasn't trying to fight the monster and defeat it that way. I had an unbreakable rope.
You had an unbreakable rope that you were going to try and tie up this werepossum.
Yeah, I wanted to lasso it and then throw the rope over a tree branch and hang it from a tree.
So instead, you threw the rope at his chest and it just kind of hit the ground.
Yeah.
But it was a scenario where, like, when it just utterly murdered James's character, I'm like, oh crap. So like, most of us are like trying to back off slowly, like, all right, maybe it'll just deal with him and we can all kind of flee. We've already had a mentality of things are bad, we can just run, which definitely fights the typical heroic mindset of a typical D&D character that, I have because I play mostly D&D. But I'm like, all right, let me just go for survival. And Guard over here is like, all right, I'm going to try this thing. I'm like, why are you engaging? He's already dead here.
I had an uncuttable rope. You don't just get an uncuttable rope and not use it, right?
So
I'm like, I can save the werepossum. I can save the party. This is going to be great.
So the thing, lunges in and, manages, Guard gets his shield up and just, deflects all the attacks. And I'm like, okay, great. Now all I got to do is just flee. And he decides to attack the thing. And I'm like, oh my God. And literally the thing just grabs his head and rips it off. I'm like, It's a robot, so there's no blood and gore, but like straight up just enough damage again, utterly kills Guard. And I'm like, oh my God. So now I'm terrified that the thing is now provoked and going to come after the rest of us. I'm like, here you go, guys. TPK session 1.
Yeah, maybe. I got a third character. I have another character in that game now. And also, James was playing. Is now playing the other NPC prisoner that we had with us. So that's a thing as well. So that was Guard. Before that was Artie, my artificer in a Ravenloft game. He got killed by Strahd, but he got an offer from the Mist that he couldn't refuse. I was like, all right, I'll let Artie come back and do that. And then my other character that Artie replaced was Tunk, and I was like, I think Tunk has told his story. He's not really going to want to come back, especially because the GM wasn't keeping the dead from moving on to their afterlife, which would have been like a pivotal point for Tunk, right? Like, if he was offered a deal and couldn't go to the afterlife
to get to Magoobliet
and spend all of his days fighting orcs in the eternal war between goblins and orcs in their afterlife, then yes, he would have come back because he would want to be able to find a way out of Ravenloft so he could, when he perished, go to the goblin afterlife. Tunk was a human, but he was raised by goblins, and Magoobliet took pity upon this human and elevated him to the status of cleric.
So I think the idea here is, number one, you and I have very different feelings. I am far more attached to my characters than you are. You are far more attached to the overarching story. And the big takeaway that I see is that you care about the story and you care about the action, but you like to keep things moving. Whereas, like, for me, I am far more reserved and like, all right, what do I have to do to preserve? Where yours like, all right, what do I have to do to be fun?
Yeah, so that's part of it too. And I also look at it like, well, what would this particular character do in those situations? So I just played a Mork Borg streamed one shot that you can see on
Infinite Black.
No, it's not on Infinite Black. It's on One Up XP. And our friend, wrote the adventure, Brian Colin. It was a lot of fun. And I played a character one hit point, fully expecting this character to die, right? And I just like through the way the mechanics work in that game and just like being kind of strategic, that game, the character actually survived. But the thing was with that character, like it was a randomly generated character, and it's like they're arrogant and cowardly. So that one was a little bit easier because I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to play to those. That being said, the character had a magic sword that hates him. And like every time you use it, it was a sweet sword, but every time you use it, you have to roll a d6. If you roll 1 and it attacks you or someone in your party, there's a good chance it would have killed me. Because it hates me. But I got lucky. It never attacked anybody else. There's bennies in that game. It's called omens that you can spend, and I happen to be able to spend them in just the right way. A player even gave me one extra one throughout the course that kept me going. So I got lucky. I kept that character alive, despite the very beginning. One of the other players was like, well, which of you guys look more warrior-like? And like none of us really did. So she was like, well, I guess it's you then. And it's like, here, try this snuff before going into battle. It was berserker snuff. Made my character go berserk and get a bunch of attacks, but also put my character right where they did not want to go. But eventually, like, that character still survived, and I would have played that character much differently had we kept playing with them. Like, that character would always be like, okay, I'm going to try and stay back and only be in the fight when I think I'm not really in danger.
So the mindset is important to you. So when you create the character, you're like, all right, this is the kind of person this is. So let's react the way that they would. And is that
Yeah, that's definitely it. Like Tony Two Tusk's death was, and also like so Jacob from XP to Level 3 was running that game, and he runs his mechanics a little bit differently. And it was like we were on this disc that was slowly descending. And, into lava. And I was like, oh, well, we're 10 feet down. I'm a barbarian. I'll run and jump and grab the ledge and get out. Right. Like we had, like one of the characters could summon flying mounts and was going to fly us out. But I'm like, it's easy enough. But the DM was like, okay, you have to roll an athletics check. And I was like, well, that's not really how jump works, but it's your game, whatever. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll rage so I'm not at disadvantage because I was a berserker and already had a level of exhaustion. And I rolled a 1. So
even with advantage? Oh, because you were countering your disadvantage.
I was countering the disadvantage. And I rolled a 1, and he's like, well, Tony goes into the lava. He misses.
Man,
so that's all right. Well, and the lava was instant death, and I'm like, okay. Fair enough. I guess I'll roll up a new character.
That's brutal, man. I mean, I know that there are always different styles that are out there.
Yeah.
While I have run those style of games in the past, that's not something I particularly enjoy as a DM. I even when I'm sitting behind the screen, I care about the story and the characters. And when you see GMs who are just like, all right, this is going to be brutal, it really takes for me a rewiring, and I have to consciously make the decision to separate myself from the players to play that particular style.
Yeah, from the character, you mean?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, even from the emotion of the players, like character death is never a thing unless like it's something that the player, unless the player is specifically looking for it. Like I'm always looking at, well, what is the outcome? If that player wants to continue the story of that character and they've died, is it within the realm of possibility? Is it out there? And I play with adults as well as with my kids, so like I'm always looking at that as an option of what if. So like to purposefully put something of like, well, you falling into lava, that's beyond just character death. that's like you need a wish spell to kind of bring them
There's
back.
no coming back from a lava bath.
So like you don't just fix that easily. So like those are things like where I've told people, you know, in my game where we're dealing with the Shattered World, I'm like, be careful around the edge. If you fall off, there is no saving. Like, you know, unless you have the ability to fly, you know, you're going to fall further than what a feather fall is going to do, and unless you could just keep doing it. Like the best possible scenario is you have like umpteen spell slots, you use them all to get to the bottom, and you're alive.
Or to a point where you can at least roll the 20 die 6.
But like, so I told them, like, ground rule, you fall off and you're falling, it's just dead because you're out of the game. There's no surviving a fall of that high, even though the game says specifically, like, it caps out at 20 die 6. I've fallen ridiculous heights in D&D and, like, stood up, shook myself off, and got up. I'm like, I'm sorry, I am wearing freaking plate mail. I fell 150 feet and I just get up. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, at this point, your plate mail should be squished flat, and like you should have shot out like toothpaste, right? But you know that's fine when you have that kind of stuff in your game, and you know you in session 0 you let us know about the falling, and that could be a problem. You know, and also like it's a good discussion to have in general session 0s, like what does the mortality fatality look like in your particular game, and to get everyone on board so that you know the expectations are had, right? Like before we'd never do that, so it's just like, oh, like you never maybe like the idea that your character could die was there, but up until it happens in your game, and like it's not something you're really expecting or prepared for, it can be a little traumatic for players that are new to the game, younger players. So it's good to have the discussion beforehand, so when it does happen, everyone's on the same page and everyone can kind of, you know, agree, you know, what's okay in the game.
And it's beyond, you know, just the concept of the rules. You know, you have to look at what is the theme of the game. What is the expectations of everyone at the table? Like, I feel that it's, you know, it's probably in my player's mindset that, okay, when I game with Ted, this is what is expected. I can do crazy stuff and my character's not going to die or perma-die unless I really want it, you know? Like, it's a safety barrier and allows for more crazy things to happen. I don't know. You know, so it's all something that having conversations with your GM, having session 0s really are helpful to this whole mentality.
And then also too, like getting into the mentality of the character you're playing, like how safe are they going to play? Are they going to always try and avoid danger, you know, at all costs, or is that you as the player playing them that way? Because I think as a role player, it's a lot more fun to experiment and play with, you know, more reckless characters. Some characters are more concerned about self-preservation. I've played other characters that they literally try and get other people to do the dangerous stuff, thinking that there's going to be something dangerous. I never say it as a player, but in character, I'm kind of like egging them on and pushing them towards things
Nudge, nudge, nudge.
that may get them killed, right? And definitely some games lend themselves, you know, Morkborg and Vast Grim or OSR style games. A lot of those style games tend to be more brutal. Shadow of the Demon Lord is another game that's supposed to be more brutal, and you know, we've seen a bit of that as well. But you know, as long as your players know what they're getting into.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, that's a fair, you know, estimation. You know, look at what the rule set is, look at who the DM is. Because, I mean, we've definitely had DMs that, I mean, they were out for blood, you know, early on, as well as, you know, even within 5th edition, you know, DMs who were just like, look, here's the story, and if you interact in a way, you go in a place that you shouldn't, you could just straight up die, and we saw it.
And you know, like, that's okay too. Like, I like games that have serious outcomes, right? I may not want them all the time, but like I did a one-shot for Saver Dice for the Skittermander adventure, which was a ton of fun. But at the end, like, we were just failing all of the checks, and the checks were to stop the ship from venting. I think a much better ending to that game would have been like for the ship to vet and also all get blasted in space and explode, and very colorful poofs of blood, because that's the story that got told, right? And that's okay. And also too, like, I don't think like the deaths have to be story driven and meaningful. Even in more narrative games, I know some people feel like, oh, your character should never die unless it's driven by the narrative and meaningful. But like in real life, sometimes shit happens. People die, and bad things happen for no good reason, unfortunately. And in the game, it's okay for that to happen too.
So for those moments, like, you have to look at, well, what does that death mean to the survivors, the player characters that are there? It can still be meaningful because they care about them, to whatever level that they would, whether it be a romantic interest or just, fast friends or even an acquaintance, like the memory of carrying on. And I've had characters at my game die because the player's like, I want to switch characters, or, it was a little bit more brutal, character died, and, player's like, all right, I'll just play somebody else, no big deal. So, like, it wasn't as big a deal to that particular player, but the characters who survived, they're like, well, how do we proceed? What do we do with the body? Do we just loot them? Do we bury them? Do we take them someplace and go do a funeral? Like, it became a, possible crux of what the next adventure is like dealing with the fallen.
Yeah, well, when Tunk died, one of the other characters kind of like considered Tunk like their buddy, and Tunk kind of like toadied to that character and considered them the boss of the group. So when Tunk died, they tried to go and retrieve Tunk from the afterlife, kind of, and then like a DM aside. And then they saw Tunk on the battlefield fighting alongside the goblins in his afterlife and realized, oh, this is what Tunk wants. And they took on, I don't know how many levels of cleric, if they, took 1 or 2 levels of cleric, but they took 1 or 2 levels of war cleric, kind of like, and became a servant of Muglubia as well, and they're an Aarakocra, not a goblin. So like that was how like Tunk's death became meaningful. It wasn't just an encounter in the game that took Tunk out, but this other characters still remembers Tunk, and so do the other ones, and it became part of it becomes a part of the story of those characters.
Yeah, and that's what it's really all about, is like, as everything ebbs and flows, what is the end result of this story look like? I mean, if you watch, TV shows or read novels, there are always characters coming into and out of the story. And until you get to, the end, you might not realize who the main characters are. You might be dealing with, you might be just playing a side character for now, and, your character becomes the main as things go on, or, maybe you don't even care about it. It's the overarching story, and everyone's there just to have fun.
But, let us know about character death in your games, how you feel about it, against it, for it. Happens all the time. Share your most gruesome demises from your characters or from the games you've run down in the comments below.
While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, even go ahead and slay that notification bell.
Quick reminder, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we drop new videos here on the channel, so come on back. But you can't wait till then. No worries, we've got you covered. There's a card up here. D&D randomness, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So until next time, stay nerdy.